things you carry that have no name, a pressure behind the eyes, a heaviness in the chest, an unexplained ache that appears in quiet moments, when the world slows down just enough for the silence to rise. And in that silence, a question emerges, not always in words, but in a knowing, a hum beneath the noise that says, something is not right. And the strange part, you've felt it for as long as you can remember. You've tried to label it: anxiety, depression, trauma, maybe even restlessness. You've blamed it on your childhood, your choices, your environment. You've traced it back to events, relationships, missed opportunities. But even after all your efforts, the root of it still slips through your fingers. It's as if the origin predates your memory, as if it began before your story even started. Carl Jung once said, "The soul is not born, it is remembered." And if that's true, then maybe what you feel isn't just yours. Maybe you are the living continuation of something that began long ago, a silent war passed down through blood and spirit, a war fought not with weapons but with silence, repression, and disconnection. There is a war many are born into and few ever realize they're still fighting, a war between the self you've been told to become and the self you were meant to be. This war begins in whispers, in small betrayals of intuition, in tiny moments where you were taught to doubt yourself, when you were told, "Don't cry," so you swallowed your grief, when you were told, "Be strong," so you masked your pain, when you were praised for obedience, for performance, for perfection, so you hid your chaos, your confusion, your questions. And the war deepened. Because every time you abandoned a part of yourself to be accepted, something sacred went underground, and though you smiled on the outside, a quiet rebellion stirred within you, a sacred resistance, a memory not of facts or faces, but a feeling, a deep, holy knowing that said, "This isn't who I truly am." But you didn't have the words. Because no one teaches us that we are born into systems that want our compliance more than our truth. Families, cultures, religions, even love itself can become battlefields when your authenticity threatens the order. So, you learned to survive. You wore the mask. You played the part. You followed the script. And for a while it worked. You fit in. You felt safe. You belonged. But the cost was spiritual. Because fitting in often requires shrinking, and shrinking requires forgetting your power, your voice, your original blueprint, the divine map imprinted on your soul before anyone told you who to be. And now in moments of quiet, late at night, early in the morning, when your guard is down, you hear the echoes, you feel the fracture, you sense the war still raging not outside of you, but within. The war between the part of you that wants to keep the peace and the part of you that was born to disrupt it. Because peace built on self-abandonment is not peace, it's performance, and performance cannot nourish the soul. The war continues every time you say yes when your body screams no, every time you betray your boundaries to be liked, every time you silence your truth to avoid rejection. These are not small acts, they are spiritual wounds. And with every wound, the soul retreats a little more, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you don't recognize yourself. Not because of age, not because of appearance, but because somewhere along the way, the self you were born with got buried under the selves you had to become. But here's the miracle. The soul never forgets. Even buried, even silenced, even worn thin by years of pretending, the soul waits. It waits beneath the rubble, beneath the noise, beneath the layers of survival. It waits for you to remember, to stop running, to turn around and face the war you were born into, not with shame, not with blame, but with sacred curiosity. To ask, whose pain am I carrying? Whose silence do I speak in? Whose story am I still acting out? And most of all, who was I before the world told me who to be? This is the beginning of the real battle, the holy confrontation, not against the world, but for your soul. It is not easy work. It will ask everything of you, your comfort, your certainty, your illusions. But it will give you something far greater in return, yourself. And once you begin to live from that place, your real self, your remembered self, the war begins to shift, not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop seeking permission to exist. You stop asking for validation to speak. You stop apologizing for your light. You start listening to the still, small voice within. You start honoring your rhythms. You start trusting the unseen architecture of your being. You begin to live as if your soul matters, because it does. And when you live like your soul matters, you disrupt everything that thrives on your disconnection. You stop being manageable, predictable, controllable. You become whole, and wholeness is dangerous to any system built on separation. That's why this war is so subtle. It doesn't want you to notice. It wants you busy, distracted, doubting, scrolling, consuming. It wants you numb, because a numb soul won't rise. But once you begin to feel again, truly feel, the numbness begins to melt. The heart begins to beat louder than the fear. The silence breaks. The remembering begins. And in that remembering, you become powerful, not in the way the world defines power, but in the way the soul remembers it. Still, rooted, alive. Not because you've won the war, but because you've stopped running from it.
There is a sacred place no one talks about, not built by hands, not found on maps. A hidden cathedral that echoes in silence, in the soft ache behind your ribs. You've walked with it for years, through crowded rooms, through quiet nights, through storms that no one else saw. You may not call it a church, you may not kneel before it, but it lives within you, and it has shaped you. Somewhere along the way, you began to carry it, not because you were asked to, not because someone told you to, but because there was nowhere else to put the weight you felt. You carried the disappointments, the doubts, the losses. You carried the prayers that went unanswered. You carried the versions of you that never made it through. And somehow, without ceremony, without a title, you became the priest of a sanctuary no one else could see. They didn't see the altar made of your longing. They didn't see the broken pews that used to be your hope. They didn't hear the echo of your questions hitting stone walls. But you did. Every day. You lived it. You lived with it. And you never stopped walking forward. There's a kind of holiness that comes not from sermons, but from surviving. From waking up in the morning with a heart that still beats even after it's been shattered. From offering kindness even when the world forgot how to be gentle. From carrying your own sacred fire when no one else noticed you were cold. This church, the one you carry alone, is not made of bricks or stained glass. It is made of memory, of ache, of moments that made you drop to your knees in the dark. It is made of choices. The choice to keep going. The choice to forgive when it wasn't asked for. The choice to believe in something more even when your hands were empty. And maybe you've wondered why you're the one who holds so much. Why you seem to feel things deeper. Why the pain of the world sticks to you like wet clothes. Why silence sometimes feels louder than noise. It's not weakness. It's not brokenness. It's because you were given a key. A key to a space that not everyone is ready to enter. A sacred responsibility to feel, to see, to carry. But here's the part you never learned, because no one ever told you. You were never meant to carry it alone. There are others like you. Others who walk through life with ancient echoes in their chest. Others who light candles in their minds just to survive the night. Others who understand that faith is not a building, but a breath. A decision to keep your heart open even when the world gives you every reason to close it. You felt like an outsider, in places that claim to offer belonging. You've questioned everything you were taught, not out of rebellion, but out of need. Out of the ache for something real, something alive, something that doesn't collapse under the weight of grief. And that ache is holy. Carl Jung once said that loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to share the things that matter most. You've known that kind of loneliness. The kind that sits beside you at the dinner table. The kind that follows you into dreams. The kind that reminds you that there's something inside you that longs to be understood and hasn't been. But what if that ache, that loneliness, that weight isn't a curse? What if it's the doorway? What if your sensitivity, your depth, your inner knowing, what if all of it is part of the sacred architecture of your being? What if you're not lost, but entrusted? Entrusted with something ancient. Entrusted with a light that doesn't flicker. Entrusted with a message the world has forgotten how to hear.
And once you stop running, something else begins. A quiet unfolding, a return. Like walking barefoot back to sacred ground you didn't realize you'd left. You begin to see the patterns, not as curses, but as clues. You trace the invisible lines etched into your behaviors, your thoughts, your pain. And suddenly, it all starts to make sense. You weren't crazy. You weren't weak. You weren't broken. You were carrying a memory older than language, a wound that didn't start with you, a war that needed someone brave enough to stop it. And now here you are, the one who stopped pretending, the one who chose to feel instead of numb, the one who finally asked, what if the most important battle of my life is the one I can't see? Because the real battle is spiritual, always has been. It's not between you and others, it's between you and the part of you that was taught to hide. You can feel it now more than ever. Every time you laugh and it feels like you've remembered something ancient. Every time you cry and it feels like a baptism. Every time you sit in stillness and your soul whispers, this is what I've been waiting for. It's not a destination, it's a homecoming. To remember who you were before the masks, before the performance, before the war. There's a light in you that was never extinguished, only buried, and now it flickers back to life. The light of your real voice, your honest grief, your sacred anger, your wild joy. You are not here to be numb. You are not here to be perfect. You are not here to play a role in someone else's story. You are here to remember. And in remembering, you break the chain. What once flowed through you unconsciously, shame, silence, fear, now stops with you. You feel the weight begin to lift, not all at once, but moment by moment, truth by truth, breath by breath. And as the weight lifts, something rises in its place. Not a version of you improved or corrected, but the original self, the blueprint, the soul untouched by the noise. That version doesn't need permission, doesn't need to be fixed, doesn't need to earn its worth. It simply is. And when you live from that place, you become a living disruption, a contradiction to the systems that benefit from your sleep, a threat to the silence that has shaped generations, and yet a healing. For when one soul remembers, it gives others permission to do the same. You become a mirror for what we've forgotten, and in your reflection, we remember too. Not everything can be explained. Not every pain has a clean narrative. Some things can only be felt, known in the bones, recognized in the soul. That's what this war is. Not a headline, not a statistic, but a sacred tension passed down through bloodlines. And it ends when one person dares to feel what generations refuse to. Maybe that person is you. Maybe that's why you're still here.
still searching, still feeling, still asking questions that make others uncomfortable. Because you didn't come here to sleep. You came here to remember. And now, after everything you've survived, after all the roles, the betrayals, the forgetting, you are finally close, not to the end of something, but to the beginning of you, of the true war ending, of the soul finally speaking louder than the fear. And if your heart is beating faster right now, if something inside you feels like it's waking up, follow it. That's not coincidence. That's memory. That's God calling you back. Back to the war you were born into. Back to the part of you that never gave up. Back to your truth. And if this message found you today, it's not by accident. You didn't just stumble onto this. Something deeper led you here. So now, let that same voice lead you forward. Let it guide you into the next chapter, into the next truth, into the life that was always waiting for you beneath the noise. And if something in you was moved, if a memory was stirred, if a light was relit, don't leave it here. Carry it with you. Let it shape the way you speak, love, listen, and live. Let it move you into action, into awakening, into remembering. And if you're ready to walk this road with others who feel it too, if you want to keep peeling back the layers and walking towards what's real, then stay close. Subscribe to the channel, not just to receive content, but to stay connected to the frequency of your soul. This isn't just a page. It's a sanctuary for those who remember things they were never taught, for those who feel things they can't explain, for those who are born into silence and are finally ready to speak. Leave a comment below. Share what stirred inside you. Let others know they're not alone in this quiet war. And if you know someone who carries the same ache, the same invincible memory, send this to them. Sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with resonance. And if your soul whispered yes while listening to this, then it's already begun. The war may not be over yet, but you've already started to win.
You don't need a pulpit to speak the truth. You don't need a crowd to be seen by God. You don't need the right words or the right background or the right rituals. What you need is already inside you. And perhaps that's why you felt so heavy for so long, because no one told you that the weight you carry is sacred, that the questions you ask are prayers, that the tears you've shed are baptisms, that the silence you keep is a form of worship. You've lived as if you had to earn your place in the world, as if your worth depended on how little space you take up, as if love was something you had to buy with your own exhaustion. But the church you carry says otherwise. It says you were never meant to prove anything. You were only meant to remember. Remember the child you once were, the one who believed in magic without needing evidence, the one who cried freely, who laughed loudly, who danced without shame. That child is still here. That child knows the path back, not to some external temple, but to the inner sanctuary, the one that's never closed, never denied you, never asked you to be someone else. When you feel lost, that's where you return, not to doctrine, not to punishment, but to presence, to stillness, to the breath that says, I'm still here, I'm still whole, I'm still sacred. There are people walking through life with smiles that never reach their eyes. People who show up to all the right places, say all the right things, wear all the right masks, and yet feel utterly hollow because they've built lives on foundations that were never theirs. They've built shrines to expectations, altars to approval. But you've built something different. You've built honesty, even when it hurt. You've built silence, even when the world screamed for noise. You've built hope, not because you saw results, but because you chose to believe in what you could not yet see. And that makes you different. Not weaker, not wrong, just sacredly different. There are people walking through life with smiles that never reach their eyes. People who show up to all the right places, say all the right things, wear all the right masks, and yet feel utterly hollow because they've built lives on foundations that were never theirs. They've built shrines to expectations, altars to approval. But you've built something different. You've built honesty, even when it hurt. You've built silence, even when the world screamed for noise. You've built hope, not because you saw results, but because you chose to believe in what you could not yet see. And that makes you different. Not weaker, not wrong, just sacredly different. There are people walking through life with smiles that never reach their eyes. People who show up to all the right places, say all the right things, wear all the right masks, and yet feel utterly hollow because they've built lives on foundations that were never theirs. They've built shrines to expectations, altars to approval. But you've built something different. You've built honesty, even when it hurt. You've built silence, even when the world screamed for noise. You've built hope, not because you saw results, but because you chose to believe in what you could not yet see. And that makes you different. Not weaker, not wrong, just sacredly different. There are people who won't understand you, who will mistake your depth for drama, who will call your intuition foolish, who will ask you to tone it down, lighten up, fit in. Don't. You weren't born to fit into a place that has forgotten its own soul. You weren't born to water yourself down for the comfort of those who've never tasted real depth. You were born to carry what others have dropped, to remember what others have buried, to speak what others have silenced, to feel what others numb. And that calling is not small. It is not weak. It is not invisible. It is divine. And yet, divinity does not always feel like glory. Sometimes it feels like grief, like sitting on the floor of your life surrounded by shattered beliefs, wondering if anything still matters. But even there, especially there, the presence is with you. The sacred doesn't abandon its vessels. It breaks them open so the light can finally come through. There's a church within you that never closes its doors, where angels don't sing from choirs, but from memory, where hymns rise not from mouths, but from the gut, from the ache, from the pulse that never quits. That's your church. That's the place you've tended in secret. The place you lit candles no one else could see. The place you kept alive when everything else tried to put it out. And if no one has told you yet, thank you. Thank you for carrying it. Thank you for walking with it. Thank you for not abandoning it, even when it felt pointless, even when you were tired, even when you doubted. Because the truth is, you've never walked alone. Not really. For every tear you cried in the dark, there was a listening ear in the invisible. For every question you whispered into the void, there was a presence that heard you. For every crack in your faith, there was light slipping in. What if your greatest heartbreak was also your initiation? What if every time you fell apart, something holy was rebuilding you? What if the pain wasn't proof of absence, but of transformation? You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are becoming. And the church you carry is not finished. It's just beginning to sing. So don't silence your story. Don't hide your softness. Don't mistake your ache for weakness. That ache is a compass. It's showing you the way home, not to a place, but to a truth, a knowing, a sanctuary. You may feel small at times, insignificant, forgotten, but in the architecture of the soul, you are a cathedral, built by pain, yes, but also by grace, held together not by stone, but by spirit. Seen or unseen, it does not matter. The sacred does not depend on witness. It only depends on the fire within. Let it burn. Let it guide. Let it whisper what you were always meant to remember. That even in silence, even in solitude, even in seasons of doubt, you are the temple. You are the altar. You are the prayer. And the church you carried alone is the one heaven never forgot.